fluorescent lights above buzzed softly as Dan adjusted the focus on a photo of rust-stained tiles in the break room. It wasn't art, just a habit. He raised the camera, captured the bland symmetry, then lowered it again and sighed. 9:43 p.m., another late night. The cheap coffee burned the back of his throat, but he welcomed the sting. It kept him awake, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the glass jar with a faded handwritten label, Sicily 2025. Inside, a modest collection of crumpled bills and loose change. A dream for two, saved one tired day at a time. His phone buzzed, then glanced at the screen, a notification from Instagram. Stacy tagged Stephanie in her story. He frowned. Stephanie? His wife? He tapped it. The video was short, loud music, laughter, champagne glasses, the Eiffel Tower glittering in the background. But then the camera lingered just a second too long. Stephanie, unmistakable in a red silk dress, leaned into a tall, clean-cut man. He held her waist. She laughed at something he whispered, raising her glass in a toast. The caption shimmered at the bottom. New chapter. Dan stared. His thumb hovered. Replay. Pause. The tagged username linked to Stephanie's now suspiciously empty profile. Story deleted, but not fast enough. He zoomed in. Her hair, not the one he gave her. He blinked, as if the image might vanish like some cruel hallucination conjured by exhaustion, but it didn't. He opened their last text thread. The last message was from her. Don't worry, babe. I just need a few quiet days to think. The spa has bad signal. I'll call you when I can. His hands felt cold. He dialed. Voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Dan stood up too quickly. The camera fell from the table and hit the floor with a sharp thud. He didn't pick it up. Instead, he walked to his locker, pulled out his jacket, and sat down again, staring at the jar. Sicily, 2025. The dream they were building together, or so he thought. Now, Paris, with another man, a ring. He wasn't sure how long he sat there numb. Then something shifted in his chest. Not rage, not even grief, just silence. Heavy. Focused. He opened the airline's website. He still had access to her frequent flyer login. He had booked the ticket himself last month, a surprise for her. Her favorite window seat. He found the return flight. Could cancel. No text, no explanation, just a void where trust used to live. Dan stared at the screen. Stephanie would discover it soon enough. He imagined her confusion giving way to panic. He imagined her alone in a beautiful city without a plan. Yet he smiled. But he didn't stop either. The night after Dan canceled the flight, he didn't sleep. He lay in the dark, fully dressed, the camera still on the floor beside the bed like a dropped truth no one wanted to pick up. The silence in the house was louder than the city outside. In it, he could almost hear her voice, rehearsed, soft, pleading. It's not what it looks like, but Dan didn't want apologies. He wanted clarity. By morning, he'd stopped checking his phone. Stephanie still hadn't called. Her last voicemail was nothing more than a tired, "Hey, babe," sent before the lie unraveled. No apology, no explanation, just absence. Dan logged into their shared bank account, the one where his overtime bonuses landed. It was emptier than expected. Then he saw a transfer to an unfamiliar account, recent, 5 digits. He dug deeper. She'd opened a private savings account under her name months ago. The trail was neat, clean, almost professional. So she had a plan, and he'd just been funding it. Dan stared at the numbers on the screen, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the desk. That bonus, the one he'd earned by pulling 3 back-to-back 12-hour shifts, to fund Paris, to fund him. He could feel something in his chest. Not quite rage, not grief either. Something colder, like a reset. By lunchtime, he was at the bank. His name was still on everything, joint account. He had rights. He moved what was left, closed the extras, left only what was necessary. He called the credit card company, flagged suspicious charges, froze the shared card, reissued his own. The banker asked if he wanted to notify his wife. Dan simply said, she'll find out soon enough. He left the building with a strange stillness in his body, like he'd stepped outside of himself. Every action that followed was precise, intentional, the kind of focus he hadn't felt in years. The fog of routine had lifted, replaced by a sharpened edge. Back home, he stood in the doorway, staring at the space they'd called ours. He looked at the bookshelf she'd filled with cookbooks she'd never used. The canvas prints of sunrises she said reminded her of hope. Her perfumes on the dresser, untouched in weeks. He didn't pack her things. He packed his slowly, deliberately. Camera first, then closed, documents. The jar labeled Sicily 2025, still half full, went in last. Not because it still meant anything, but because he had earned every dollar inside, alone. Before he left, he taped a small envelope to the fridge. It held two things: the house key and a note. You said we couldn't afford dreams. You were right, but I dream better without you now. That night, Dan checked into a small rental above a bookstore. The walls smelled like dust and old ink. The owner offered him a free coffee after seeing the camera bag on his shoulder. You a pro, she asked. Dan hesitated. No, not yet. He opened his laptop, started a new folder. I titled it The Quiet Exit. Then he opened a fresh document and wrote a simple pitch. A photojournalism series on people who've walked away from betrayal, silently. Hell, he didn't want revenge. He didn't want to scream. He wanted to understand the kind of silence that followed the breaking point. The invisible stories. The ones behind closed doors, in quiet airport terminals, in late-night motel check-ins, where forgiveness wasn't offered and wasn't needed. His phone lit up. Stephanie, calling. He let it ring, then blocked the number. She would come back, eventually, but he wouldn't be there when she did. A week passed. Stephanie's absence had become just another quiet fact in Dan's life, like the hum of the fridge in the kitchen or the way morning light slanted through the blinds. It was no longer a wound. It was an opening. He hadn't told anyone yet, not his coworkers, not his sister, not even his best friend Tom, who'd texted twice asking when they were all getting together for dinner again. Dan left the messages unread. What was there to say? My wife's in Paris with a stranger, and I canceled her way back. No, that wasn't a dinner conversation. Instead, Dan went to work, came home, and started filming. The first person he interviewed was himself. No lights, no prep, just a single take. He sat in the middle of the narrow rental, stared straight into the lens, and hit record. My name is Dan, he began. I used to believe that if you work hard enough, love deep enough, and stay patient long enough, things work out. But that's not always true. He paused, swallowed. Sometimes love isn't a two-way street. It's a hallway with mirrors on one side. You keep looking forward, but the reflection isn't real. It's just you. Walking alone. He stopped the recording there, didn't even watch it back. He uploaded it anonymously to a private cloud. The next evening, he walked through the train station with his camera slung over his shoulder, scanning for the stories no one tells. A man sitting alone on a bench, wedding ring still on, hands trembling around a cup of vending machine coffee. A woman dragging a suitcase with stickers from cities she'd never smiled in. An older gentleman taking off his tie, crumpling it in his lap, blinking too fast. Dan asked if he could talk to them. Some said no, but one said yes. All right, 62, used to be married for 31 years. His wife left a post-it on the mirror. That was it. He told Dan that silence doesn't always mean peace. It's just the noise no one wants to deal with. He laughed bitterly, then cried. Dan thanked him, turned the camera off, and walked home in the rain. He didn't feel pity or rage. What he felt was weight. A strange comfort, as if by collecting these stories, his own was becoming bearable. Meanwhile, Stephanie was unraveling. He saw it not through text or missed calls. Those had long stopped, but through silence, the kind that screamed. Her social media, once bursting with curated joy, had gone dormant. No new photos, no captions. Her usual filtered life had fallen off the grid. He imagined the moment she realized the return flight was canceled. Imagined her trying to use her card and being declined. Trying to call him, failing. Opening the banking app and seeing the zeros, the closed tabs. That moment used to give him satisfaction. Now it gave him closure. He didn't need to prove anything to her. He was building something beyond her reach. At work, people began to notice. Dan no longer stayed late. He clocked out on time, left with a sense of purpose he never had before. He wore the same old jacket, but something in his posture had changed. He looked lighter, sharper. During lunch breaks, he edited interviews. Late at night, he arranged clips by emotion, shock, numbness, clarity, acceptance. Like a map out of the maze, his series began taking form. Quiet divorces, stories without screaming. Each frame, each soundbite was like a shard of glass removed from his skin, one by one. Then, one morning, a letter came. No return address, just his name handwritten in a familiar, looping cursive inside a single sheet. I don't know where you are or who you've become since Paris, but I need to explain. He left. 2 days in, he said I was too much. that he wasn't ready. I had nowhere to go. You canceled the ticket. You closed the accounts. I was stranded. I don't blame you. I didn't think you were capable of doing something so cold. You used to be the kindest man I knew. Please call me, even if just to scream at me, just so I know you're still you. He folded the letter, didn't shred it, didn't keep it, just walked outside, slipped it into the trash bin behind the bookstore, and pressed the lid shut. That evening, he filmed a new outro for his series. The camera lingered on his face as he spoke softly. Some people think silence is weakness, that if you don't yell, don't rage, don't fight, you're surrendering. But silence can be a door closing, a goodbye with no explanation, a quiet act of reclaiming yourself, a long pause. Then, sometimes, leaving without a word is the loudest thing you'll ever say. And for the first time, Dan smiled, not because it was over, but because he was just beginning. The key was still under the mat. Dan had left it there deliberately, not as an invitation, but as a test. 2 weeks had passed since the letter, since he'd thrown it away, since her silence had stretched from days into dread. And then, just like that, the door to the past creaked open. He returned to the house late in the evening, not because he missed it, but because he needed to retrieve the last box from the attic. It held photos, old negatives, undeveloped rolls of film from a time before everything cracked. He wasn't even sure why he wanted them anymore. Nostalgia? Closure? Maybe. Just to know what moments used to feel like. The porch light was on. His breath caught. She was inside. He stepped through the doorway without knocking. The house smelled the same, lavender and lemon floor polish, but the air was different now. Still. Braced. Stephanie stood in the kitchen. Same hair, same flawless nails, but something in her posture had wilted. She was wearing a hoodie of his, the one with paint stains on the sleeve. The illusion of familiarity was almost comical. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. Dane, he didn't answer, just walked past her, heading toward the attic ladder in the hallway. The floor creaked under his weight deliberately. Please, she said, talk to me. He paused at the ladder. About what? She swallowed. Everything. He gave her a long, neutral look, the kind he used to give clients who wanted impossible edits for no extra pay. Stephanie took a step closer. You left. No explanation, just vanished. You emptied the accounts. Canceled the card. I couldn't even get a cab to the airport. Dan nodded. You didn't need a cab. You had a new life, remember? New chapter. She flinched. That was... She began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. Don't insult both of us with explanations. You made a choice, I made mine. I panicked, she said, voice cracking. You stopped answering. I didn't know how to fix it. I needed you to say something. I did, Dan replied, his tone like glass. I said no. Stephanie blinked. When I canceled the return ticket, when I blocked your number, when I left this house without slamming a single door. That was me saying no, just not in the language you speak. Her lips trembled. You're not the same. No, he said. I'm finally not. She looked down. He left. The guy in Paris said I was too much drama, told me to grow up. Dan gave a dry laugh. Poetic. Silence stretched between them. Not hostile, just final. I kept waiting for the old you to come back, she admitted. The one who forgave everything. The one who stayed no matter how cold I was. That man died in a story someone else wrote, Dan said. I'm rewriting him now. Stephanie stepped forward, desperate. We can try again. Therapy, travel, whatever you want. You don't even have to forgive me right away. Just don't erase me. Dan stared at her, really stared. And for the first time, he didn't see his wife. He saw a woman who loved mirrors more than windows, who performed vulnerability when it served her and disappeared when it didn't. A woman who used to study angles on her phone more than she studied the person beside her in bed. He finally understood. She didn't miss him. She missed the version of herself that he made possible. The version that looked good standing next to someone stable. He walked past her to the stairs, box now under his arm. I'm not erasing you, he said quietly, hand on the doorknob, but I'm done carrying you around like a story that still needs telling. She choked out, Dan? He turned to her one last time. You know what I learned standing behind a camera all these years? He asked. Focus doesn't lie. It just shows you what you weren't willing to see. Stephanie's eyes welled up. Dan opened the door, letting in a gust of cold night air. Before stepping out, he looked back one last time. You said I used to be the kindest man you knew. You were right. But kindness isn't the same as weakness. Silence isn't the same as surrender, and leaving isn't failure, not when staying means forgetting who you are. He stepped outside. This time, the door didn't slam. It clipped shut like punctuation at the end of a sentence. Stephanie, she was left alone in the kitchen, surrounded by carefully chosen decor and an emptiness that couldn't be filtered or posted away. Dan stood at the edge of the Pacific, camera slung over his shoulder, jeans rolled just enough to let the waves wash over his feet. It had been 3 months since he left the house for good. Since then, his photo series, The Quiet Exit, had grown far beyond what he imagined. He'd received messages from strangers across the world, men, women, couples, stories of betrayal, silence, slow awakenings. Not all were tragic. Some were liberating. Some were just honest. He hadn't told most of them his own story. He didn't need to. It lived in the spaces between every frame he captured, in the quiet pauses, the glances off camera, the slumped shoulders of someone holding everything in for far too long. Dan hadn't returned to photography for art. He'd returned for truth. The final interview in his project had taken place that morning. A woman in her 50s, elegant but weary, had sat across from him in a park in San Diego and whispered, "I stayed 20 years longer than I should have because I thought leaving meant losing, but I realize now leaving was the only way to win myself back." Dan didn't even press stop on the camera for a while. He just let the moment breathe. Now, as the tide rolled in and out, he watched a young couple nearby take selfies on the rocks. They looked awkward, happy, messy, real. It made him smile. He raised his camera and snapped a shot. Not posed, not perfect, just honest. For the first time in a long time, he felt present. His phone buzzed. A text from Tom. Heard the series hit 100K views. You still planning that trip? Dan stared at the message. The trip, not to Sicily. That dream was gone, and that was okay. This one was different. He tapped a reply. Yeah, just booked a flight. Patagonia, shooting solo. Might turn it into something. He hesitated, then added, "Thanks for not pushing me to talk. Just being there mattered." He put the phone away and stepped back from the surf. In his backpack was the jar labeled Sicily 2025, still with the same label, now half full of different currency. Not euros. Not for someone else. For him, a symbol not of lost love but reclaimed purpose. He didn't need to rename the jar. It had always been about a destination. He just changed where it led. As he walked back toward the road, the sun dipped toward the horizon, gold scattered across the water like the shimmer of something once broken, now reassembled. Before crossing the beach, he turned and took one final picture. No subject, just the ocean, open, wide. Silent. Then he whispered it, more to himself than anyone. Silence is a language. Sometimes it says exactly what needs to be heard. And for the first time in a long time, Dan didn't feel like he was escaping anything. He was simply walking forward. No noise, no apologies. Just peace.